that took place very early in Krishna's childhood activities in Vrindavan. It was before the Govardhan Lila, but he's just at the age of 6. He's taking care of cows instead of calves. So he's around 6 years old because he lifted Govardhan Hill when he was 7. And there are 2 pastimes where the brothers, Krishna and Balaram, weren't together. I mean, there was a pretense, there was a purpose. Well, Balaram wasn't there. One of the references says, so that the 2 were when Krishna went to take care of when he was still 5, and Brahma stole the calves and cowherd boys. Balaram stayed home. And there was a purpose in his staying home, because Krishna then expanded himself as every one of the calves and cowherd boys for 1 whole year, so that the mothers would have Krishna as their son, the cows could have Krishna as their calf. Balaram wasn't there. And this is another pastime where Balaram wasn't there. And part of the reason why Balaram wasn't there is an absolute role reversal. In Krishna's pastimes, there are many cases where there would be some danger and Krishna would protect everybody from the danger. But this is a pastime where Krishna was in danger. And what are they going to do? Call out for Krishna to get himself out of danger. But Balaram wasn't there, because Balaram could have taken care of the danger. So it was orchestrated by Krishna's internal potency. Now the Kaliya is the name of this many-hooded serpent that lived in a lake that was formed by the movements of the Jamuna River. Sometimes rivers move very swiftly. Sometimes off to the side there's some indentation and the water from the river fills up a lake. Many lakes are fed by rivers. So Kalia Lake was such a river. Kalia Lake was formed by the Jamuna River. And it was a place in the river Jamuna where the lake was really deep. It's said that the river Jamuna was a lake inhabited by a serpent, Kaliya, whose fiery poison constantly heated and boiled its waters. Indeed, the vapors thus created were so poisonous that birds flying over the contaminated lake would fall dead into the lake. Sometimes there are, even in our modern times, there are cobras with many hoods. Here's a photograph of a cobra with many hoods. But he had a lot more hoods than this guy. We'll find out as we go along. So above, when poison is very, very intense, then it causes a vapor. And the vapor was such that all living entities that flew and all living entities some distance surrounding, there were no trees, there was no vegetation except for one tree. We'll hear about that one tree, a Kadamba tree. The wind blowing over that deadly lake carried droplets of water to the shore. Simply by coming in contact with that poisonous breeze, all vegetation and creatures on the shore died. So Krishna knew about it. He wanted to do something about it. He wanted to remove that Kaliya serpent so the water of the Kalia Lake could be normal again. So he made the plan that one morning, when he rose very early in the morning to take care of the calves, purposefully that day, Balaram was not present. Now, the normal routine that the cowherd boys travel was different this day for some reason. That's Krishna's reason. They went straight away from Nandagram to the river Jamuna, where the Kalia Lake was. And Krishna knew exactly, had a plan in mind. When the cows and the cowherd boys got to the lake, they were very thirsty, and they drank the water of that lake. And when they drank the water of that lake, in the center of the picture is a ghat. There's like steps leading down to the lake, and they all passed out as if dead or unconscious. Now, they got there more quickly than Krishna did, and when Krishna saw that situation, there's a very nice description in the Bhagavatam that he, for a moment, was puzzled. Now, he's never puzzled because he's omniscient. But his puzzlement is not the same as ours, and we get puzzled by some circumstance. It was something similar happened when he saw the cowherd boys enter into the mouth of the Aghasura demon. When that happened, two things. He wanted that the cowherd boys not enter the cave, but the nature of the personality of God is he just desires something and it happens. He just desires something and it happens. The Sanskrit word for this is, I forget the Sanskrit word. But for some reason, he desired that they not enter, and then they entered. And he was appreciating how wonderful his own Yogamaya potency acts, that he was desiring something and it didn't happen for the purpose of enhancing the pastime. So same thing. He saw all the cowherd boys lying here and there, and the cows as if dead, and the cows and the cowherd boys were very dear to him. So Krishna simply glanced upon them, and his glance is, as you know, very, very powerful. The glance of the Supreme Lord is sufficient to create universes. Mahavishnu, when he glances over the material energy, pradhan, voila, universes are created. His glance is very powerful. So they were very appreciative. Krishna brought them back to life, as it were, and they're ready for the next part of the pastime. So here's one example. Of course, in different Ramayanas, there's different teachings. One says that when the ocean personified didn't come, he shot arrows into the ocean. Another version said just by glancing upon the ocean began to boil. And all the aquatics in the ocean were terribly afraid. Their lives were at risk. So then Samudra, pictured here, he came forward and offered to obeisances to Ram. So the point is, the glance of the Supreme Lord is very powerful. So we're going to hear now a little history of how Kaliya became Kaliya. Before he was Kaliya, he was a sage. And as you see in the painting here, there's two sages, Veda Shira, and the other sage is Ashvashira. Vedashira and Ashvashira. So Vedashira is the one on our right, and he was residing on the top of a very, very, very beautiful mountain, high up a mountain in a forested area. Vedashira resided there. And then another sage came and he would really appreciated it. What a nice place. So he asked the inhabitant, Vedashira, how about if we both stay here in this same mountain and engage in our austerities and penances here? Vedashira was proud and said, the mountain's not big enough for both of us. You're going to have to find another place. And Ashvashira said, wait a minute, you must know the philosophy. The philosophy says everything belongs to Krishna, belongs to the Supreme Lord, Vishnu. So how you're claiming as if it's yours? You're proud and envious and arrogant. You're not even a sage at all. So they argued back and forth, and one sage cursed the other and vice versa. There was a purpose. Ashvashira, the visiting sage, cursed Vedashira. You're so envious, you must become a serpent. So it became Kaliya, the serpent. The other, he counter-cursed him, oh, you become a crow. And there's a nice story. Some of you may know the story of Lord Jagannath. There's a story of Lord Jagannath found in Skanda Purana. Well, I'm going to go over here a little bit. We'll come back to this one. Over here a little bit is, in Skanda Purana, there's a description. There was a king named Indradumna, and he was very pious and very virtuous and wonderful kingdom and so forth and so on. But he had this burning desire to meet eye to eye, in person, face to face, the Supreme Lord. So it's a long narration, but a shorter version is, one time he was performing a yajna, and he asked all the brahmanas if they knew of a way by which he could see the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And one sage stood up and said, I've been there. The place is on the top of Nila Parvat, south of the something river, and there's a lake on by the side of that mountain, and the personality of Godhead is residing there, and you go there, and I saw something very wonderful. There was a crow. There was a crow that descended and touched the lake with his beak because he wanted some water, and instantly the body of the crow transformed into a four-armed Vaikuntha form and ascended to the spiritual world. It's such a sacred place, you should go there. I've come all the way from Nila Parvat to inform you because I know you're such a devotee. So that's the crow. One became a crow, but was delivered by the grace of the Supreme Lord. The other became a serpent, who was delivered by the grace of the Supreme Lord. So his name was Kaliya, from Vedashira, a sage, to Kaliya, a serpent. And he continued in his serpent's body being very envious. So he resided in a place that many people believe is near Fiji. And even today, Kaliya is worshipped. Krishna, Kaliya, the subduing of the Kaliya serpent, was worshipped in Fiji. And he was residing in a place known as Ramanaka Lake, near Fiji. And Garuda, you all know who is Garuda, he has as his natural food, among other things, snakes. So the serpents were very bothered by Garuda coming and taking some of them away for his food. So they made a truce with him. Then on a regular basis, they would make offerings, and he could come and take them. But Garuda was very happy with the arrangement, but Kaliya was very envious. So he started snitching the offerings before Garuda could come. And Garuda found out that Kaliya is doing this. So he came after Kaliya, very intent on punishing him. And as he attacked, Kaliya tried to attack him with his poisonous fangs, but Garuda was far more powerful, so Kaliya ran for his life. And when he ran for his life, he was able to travel even into the lower planetary systems and lower, and finally he reached the bottom of the universe. And the bottom of the universe is Lord Ananta, who was holding up the universe. And so he appealed, Ananta, you're my brother. We're both serpents. Please help me. So Ananta said, Garuda is very powerful, but I know there's one place that he will not go. He won't go to the place by the bank of the river Jamuna where there's a lake, because there was a curse by Shobari Muni that if he ever goes there, he'll instantly die. So there's a story behind that, how that happened. So Kaliya went there. He took shelter of the lake in the river Jamuna where Garuda wouldn't go. And the curse by Shobari Muni, you've heard his name before? No? Shobari Muni, during Satya Yuga, he was very expert in meditation, because that's the process of perfection during Satya Yuga. So he was so good at meditation that he had a practice of meditating underwater. When you're meditating underwater, you can't cheat, because you suspend the life air. You breathe underwater, you're finished. So he was meditating underwater one time when he saw Garuda coming to take some fish. Snakes and fish are both natural food for Garuda. The sage forbid him to take fish. But Garuda, very powerful and bold, he was really hungry. He seized some fish. And seeing that the unfortunate fish were disappearing from the lake at Garuda's expense, he cursed Garuda. If you ever come back here again and start to eat fish, you're going to immediately lose your life. Now, you can't curse Garuda. But Shobari did, and Garuda honored it. So Ananta knew that's one place where Garuda won't go. That was his advice to Kaliya. So Kaliya went there. The water in the lake was very deep, and like the immovable depths of the ocean, could not be agitated. Approaching the lake was difficult, for its shores were covered with holes in which serpents lived. All around the lake was a fog generated by the fire of the serpent's poison. And this powerful fire would at once burn up every blade of grass that happened to fall into the water for a distance of 8 miles from the lake. That's 1 yojana. The atmosphere was most unpleasant. So Krishna knew all this. That was the purpose of this pastime, was to rid the lake of the Kaliya serpent. So what he did, he climbed up a nearby Kadamba tree. Now the Kadamba tree was still alive because it is said that Garuda placed some nectar on that tree, the Kadamba tree, so it would survive. And we'll see pictures at the very end where the Kaliya serpent Lila took place, and it is said the very same Kadamba tree is still there. It's a really big tree, and a really old tree. So Krishna went to that tree, tightened up his belt, slapped his arms, climbed up the tree, and jumped into the lake. The tree was unharmed because Garuda had placed nectar on it. So this is his climbing, and that's his jumping. And there's a very old painting depicting the pastime over on the upper right. That's the cowherd boys knocked out from drinking the water. On the left is the Lila is over. They're walking away. And down in the lower right, that's a castle or a palace inside the lake where Kaliya lived. He had wives also. And Krishna's climbing up the Kadamba tree. All these things happening in one painting. And he jumped into the poisonous water. And when Krishna jumps into a lake, it's a big deal because he's the personality of God and he's very powerful. The water around the lake flowed, and the lake became very disturbed and agitated. Poisonous, fearsome waves flooded the surrounding lands to a distance of 100 bow lengths. This is not at all amazing, however, because the Supreme Lord possesses infinite strength. So there he is jumping into the lake. There's another image. He's jumping into the lake. And everything became agitated surrounding the lake. When he jumped in the lake, Kaliya heard the sound. And he uttered, "Who has come into my lake?" Being very envious and territorial and like that. So he surfaced, and when he saw Krishna, Krishna saw him. There was poisonous fire emanating from his mouths, many, many, many hoods. Very poisonous, terrible serpent. Kaliya saw that Krishna, who wore yellow silken garments, was very delicate, his attractive body shining like a glowing white cloud, his chest bearing the mark of Srivatsa, his face smiling beautifully, and his feet resembling the whorl of a lotus flower. Envious Kaliya bit the Lord on his chest and completely enwrapped him in his coils. So this is the starting of Krishna's in danger. And there's many paintings, many. There's 150 paintings in this whole presentation because the Leela is so celebrated. There's Krishna in the coils. Seeing Krishna in the grips of Kaliya, the cows, bulls, and female calves called out to Krishna in great distress. There they are on the left side, mooing. Now it hasn't happened yet, but above them, that's Nanda and Jasoda, and see behind her is Balaram and the residents of Nandagram, because what happened was while Krishna was in the coils of the Kaliya serpent, they all were panicked. So one swift moving boy went very, very quickly to Nandagram, informed to Nanda Maharaj what had happened, and asked him to please do something. Nanda smiled, slapped his arms and said, "I'm going immediately, I'll take care of this." And Mother Jasoda, she was in big anxiety. And Balaram was trying to convince her, no, Krishna's just enjoying. And, she's Mother Jasoda, she had to go immediately. And Balaram was just smiling because he knew Krishna's just enjoying. No worries. Seeing the inauspicious omens, the residents rushed to the banks of the Jamuna in search of their dearmost Krishna. The Supreme Lord Balaram, down below on the right side, smiled and said nothing when he saw the residents of Vrindavan in great distress. Mother Yashoda and the elder gopis feel great distress seeing Krishna in the coils of Kaliya. Look in the back. you see that Kadamba tree, and by the base of the Kadamba tree, there you see the residents of Vrindavan, and you'll see other paintings where they're in terrible distress. But Krishna's just enjoying. And when it goes on and on and on, where they see him in the coils of Krishna, here's Mother Jasoda trying to enter into the river Jamuna, and the lake is poisonous. They stop her. Balaram it takes to stop Nanda Maharaj. He's very powerful. Balaram stops Nanda and other cowherd men from entering the lake. They want to go rescue Krishna. The cowherd men are in great distress seeing Krishna in the grips of Kaliya. And eventually, after some time, it went on for quite some time, Krishna didn't want to see that distress continue longer, so Krishna decided to escape. And his method of escaping was very simple. He made his body bigger and bigger and bigger. Kaliya expanded and expanded and expanded. Then all of a sudden, Krishna became very small and then slipped out of the coils of Kaliya. The Lord remained for some time within the coils of the serpent, imitating the behavior of an ordinary mortal. But when he understood that the women, children, and other residents of the village of Gokula were in acute distress because of their love for him, their only shelter and goal in life, he immediately rose up from the bonds of the Kaliya serpent. Now he doesn't raise his fist just yet. Comes later. The Supreme Lord began expanding his body, tormenting Kaliya. Being tormented, Kaliya released him. Krishna stared at the Supreme Lord, stared at the Supreme Lord with a glance full of terrible poisonous fire. That's the bottom right. Kaliya, same. So Krishna got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then suddenly very small. Krishna released himself from the grips of Kaliya, and now he's in the lake, and he starts swimming around in circles. Kaliya looked at Krishna, very, very envious, and Krishna just moved around and around and around and around so fast that Kaliya became dizzy. Having severely depleted Kaliya's strength due to relentlessly circling, Sri Krishna, the origin of everything, pushed down Kaliya's raised shoulders and mounted his broad serpent heads. He had many heads. His lotus feet were red, and as his reddish lotus feet danced upon the hoods of the Kaliya serpent, which had jewels, then it became even more red. Red by his feet, more red than by the red of the jewels. And then comes the celebrated dance. On the right-hand side, you see Balaram stopping Nanda and others very concerned about Krishna's safety, fainting, etc. And there's age-old paintings. Here's one of them. There's Krishna dancing. There's Balaram at the edge of the lake, informing everybody no need to worry. But they have such attachment for Krishna, naturally they're worrying. They're watching as Krishna is doing his celebrated dance. Lord Krishna, the original master of all fine arts, began to dance on the serpent's hoods. It is, in some commentaries, it's said, as Krishna was dancing, the demigods saw, and they came with their musical instruments. With their musical instruments, they began playing their musical instruments, and Krishna was dancing even more ecstatically. So it was a big concert, a dance concert. Different images of Kaliya trying to bite Krishna even while he was dancing on his hoods. Yeah, here's the Krishna's dancing to the music of the demigods. Seeing the Lord dancing, his servants in the heavenly planets, the Gandharvas, Sittas, sages, Charanas, and wives of the demigods, immediately arrived there. With great pleasure, they began accompanying the Lord's dancing by playing drums. They also made offerings of songs, flowers, and prayers. So now comes a whole series of many images where Krishna's dancing on the hoods of the Kaliya serpent. Some of these are very old in their art style. Some are more modern. This is from Orissa, certain art style. I don't know the names of these art styles, but they're certain categories found in museums. Exuding poisonous wastes from his eyes, Kaliya would occasionally dare to raise one of his hoods, which would have which would breathe heavily with anger. Then the Lord would dance on it and subdue it, forcing it to bow down. Kaliya had 101 prominent heads. When one of them would not bow down, Lord Krishna would smash that stubborn head with his feet. See in the lower right. And when Krishna would smash, by the end of this pastime, the hoods of the Kaliya serpent were unrecognizable. His body was smashed. Now, there's a pastime that took place earlier in Krishna's Lila, where Nanda Maharaj was being swallowed by a serpent. Don't know that one. It was the serpent in that case was a Vidyadhara who had been cursed to become a serpent. But he was actually of good nature. He wasn't envious. He just made a mistake in his heavenly realm, and a sage cursed him. So when Krishna just once touched the head of this serpent that was swallowing Nanda's python, was swallowing Nanda Maharaj, immediately the sin and the curse was relieved, and the serpent transformed into a Vidyadhara, a celestial personality. But Kaliya wasn't like that. Kaliya was like very heavily contaminated, although previously was a sage, but envy. Kaliya had 108 prominent heads, and when one of them would not bow down, Lord Krishna, who inflicts punishment on cruel wrongdoers, would smash that stubborn head by striking it with his feet. Then as Kaliya entered his death throes, he began wheeling his heads around and vomiting ghastly blood from his mouths and nostrils. The serpent thus experienced extreme pain and misery. The story ends nice, you'll see. As Kaliya entered his death throes, he began to wheel his head around, vomiting ghastly blood from his mouth and nostrils. Now Krishna was dancing, but at the same time he was punishing, because his body is very heavy. Although he's a little boy, he's as heavy as the universe. Krishna's wonderful and powerful dancing trampled and broke all of Kaliya's 1,000 hoods. Then the serpent, profusely vomiting blood, recognized Sri Krishna to be the eternal personality of Godhead, the Supreme Master of all moving and non-moving beings, Sri Narayana. Thus, within his mind, he took shelter of the Lord. Now, Krishna knew what was going on in his mind, although he hadn't said anything yet. But there was submission after purification. So all of this was to relieve him of his sins and sinful mentality. And it took a while because he was a hard case. But he became purified. Now, a nice part is his wives, the wives of the Kaliya serpent, weren't like him. When Kaliya's wives saw how the serpent had become so fatigued from the excessive weight of Lord Krishna, who carries the entire universe in his abdomen, and how Kaliya's umbrella-like hoods had been shattered by the striking of Krishna's heels, they felt great distress. With her clothing ornaments and hair scattered in disarray, they then approached the eternal personality of Godhead. So now comes a really nice section. There's prayers that are going to be offered by the wives of the Kaliya serpent. And they're really fantastic prayers, you'll see. Seeing that Kaliya had taken shelter of the Supreme Lord in his mind, Kaliya's wives went into the presence of the Supreme Lord, desiring to protect their husband. So you see, surrounding the Kaliya serpent are the wives of the Kaliya serpent. Now, if you were an artist, how would you draw the wives of the Kaliya serpent? But this is what they did. So their lower parts of their body are serpent-like, and the upper parts of their body are human-like in most of these paintings. And they, with their hands folded, offer beautiful prayers. They were very clever too. They placed their children in front of them and bowed down to the Lord of all creatures. They desired the liberation of their sinful husband and the shelter of the Supreme Lord, the giver of ultimate shelter, and thus they folded their hands in supplication and approached him, and here are his prayers. As you can see, there's a lot of paintings of this Kalia Lila. The wives of the Kaliya serpent said, "The punishment this offender has been subjected to is certainly just. After all, you have incarnated within this world to curb down the envious and cruel persons. You are so impartial that you look equally upon your enemies and your own sons, for when you impose a punishment on a living being, you know it to be for his ultimate benefit." That's the first of their prayers. What you have done here is actually mercy for us, since the punishment you give to the wicked certainly drives away all their contamination. Indeed, because this conditioned soul, our husband, is so sinful that he assumed the body of a serpent, your anger towards him is obviously to be understood as your mercy. They glorified the greatest fortune attained by Kaliya, having received the dust from the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, for which even the goddess of fortune hankers. That's a nice drawing. Did our husband carefully perform austerities in a previous life, and with his mind free of pride and full of respect for others? Is that why you are pleased with him? Or did he in some previous existence carefully execute religious duties with compassion for all living beings? And is that why you, the life of all living beings, are now satisfied with him? Those who have attained the dust of your lotus feet never hanker for the kingship of heaven, limitless sovereignty, the position of Brahma, or rulership over the earth. They are not interested even in the perfections of yoga or in liberation itself. O Lord, although this Kaliya, the king of the serpents, has taken birth in the mode of ignorance and is controlled by anger, he has achieved that which is difficult for others to achieve. Embodied souls who are full of desires and are thus wandering in the cycle of birth and death can have all benedictions manifested before their eyes simply by receiving the dust of your lotus feet. We offer our obeisances unto you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although present in the hearts of all living beings, as the Supersoul, you are all-pervasive. Although the original shelter of all created material elements, you exist prior to their creation. And although the cause of everything, you are transcendental to all material cause and effect, being the Supreme Soul. These are very highly educated ladies. Obeisances unto you, the Absolute Truth, who are the reservoir of all transcendental consciousness and potency, and the possessor of unlimited energies, although completely free of material qualities and transformations. You are the prime mover of material nature. Obeisances unto you, who are time itself, the shelter of time and the witness of time in all its phases. You are the universe and also its separate observer. You are its creator and also the totality of all its causes. It's a very old drawing pictured here. We offer our obeisances to Lord Krishna and Lord Rama, the sons of Vasudeva, and to Lord Pradyumna and Lord Aniruddha. We offer our respectful obeisances unto the master of all the saintly devotees of Vishnu. See in the painting, there's his garland, and there's his upper garment, there's the Kadamba tree that he jumped off, there's some cows upside down, here's the wives of the Kaliya serpent, and they're offering garlands and various articles as tribute to Krishna. Obeisances to you, O Lord, who manifest varieties of material and spiritual qualities. You disguise yourself with the material qualities, and yet the functioning of those same material qualities ultimately reveals your existence. You stand apart from the material qualities as a witness and can be fully known only by your devotees. Now, they're doing a pretty good job, so it sounds like they're devotees. O Lord Rishikesh, Master of the senses, please let us offer our obeisances unto you, whose pastimes are inconceivably glorious. Your existence can be inferred from the necessity for a creator and revealer of all cosmic manifestations. But although your devotees can understand you in this way, to the non-devotees you remain silent, absorbed in self-satisfaction. It's almost finished with their prayers. Obeisances unto you, who know the destination of all things superior and inferior, and who are the presiding regulator of all that be. You are distinct from the universal creation, and yet you are the basis upon which the illusion of material creation evolves, and also the witness of this illusion. Indeed, you are the root cause of the entire world. There's Nanda. I don't know, we don't know if he's hearing all these prayers. Probably not, because he doesn't see Krishna this way. There's Balaram pictured here. And there's some musicians. O Almighty Lord, although you have no reason to be involved in material activity, still you act through your eternal potency of time to arrange for the creation, maintenance, and destruction of this universe. You do this by awakening the distinct functions of each of the modes of nature, which before the creation lie dormant. Simply by your glance, you perfectly execute all these activities of cosmic control in a sporting mood. They've really studied the Vedas, these ladies. At least once, a master should tolerate an offense committed by his child or subject. O supreme peaceful soul, you should therefore forgive our foolish husband who did not understand who you are. All these are different paintings. There is some similarity of how they depict the ladies as being the upper portion of their bodies as human, and the bottom portion being serpents. There they're offering flowers. We saw this illustration before. What does it say on the top? Anybody can read that? Kalia Lake? Okay. Okay. Here's a very different style of painting. Another very different style of painting. More modern versions. Krishna's dancing. Thus praying, they requested the Supreme Lord to forgive the great offense committed by their foolish husband. You see, they're making offerings to him. They surrendered to the Supreme Lord completely and wished to execute his order. The Supreme Lord immediately showed his mercy and released the serpent Kaliya, who had fallen unconscious. Kaliya slowly regained his vital force and sensory functions. Breathing loudly and painfully, he addressed the Supreme Lord in humble submission. Now, it doesn't give detailed prayers, but he offered prayers to the Supreme Lord, paraphrasing some of the prayers offered by his wives. Having been released by Krishna, Kaliya joined his wives in worshiping him with great joy and reverence. Again, there's Nanda and Jasoda and Krishna standing next to Balaram. This is when he's sending them off. Brihat Bhagavatamrita discusses this pastime in this way. By offering prayers in this manner, Kaliya was blessed by Krishna to become like Anantashesh. Kaliya also desired to become Lord Krishna's carrier. Now this is found in the commentary. This is chapter 16. He desired to become Krishna's carrier. Garuda and the serpents are originally related as brothers, both born of Kayadu. That's in the Mahabharata, or it's in the Bhagavatam. Kayadu was one of the daughters of what's his name? That offended Narada Muni. Daksha, one of the daughters of Daksha. And many of the daughters of Daksha were given in marriage to different sages. So Kayadu, one of his daughters, gave birth to serpents. And therefore Kaliya indicated to Krishna, if you ever have to go to a distant place, you should also think of me as your personal carrier. I am the servant of your servant, and in the wink of an eye I can travel hundreds of millions of yojanas. Thus, the Puranas narrate that in the course of Lord Krishna's eternal cycle of pastimes, when Kamsa orders the Lord to come to Mathura, he sometimes goes there mounted upon Kaliya. Far out, huh? So what does that mean? It means every day of Brahma, only once in each day of Brahma, Krishna appears and performs his pastimes in Vrindavan. And the day of Brahma is a long time. And then there's Brahma's night, and then the next day. So Krishna appears in different days of Lord Brahma's life. And the pastimes vary slightly. And in one of those yuga cycles, Kaliya carries Krishna to Mathura, according to one of the Puranas. Kaliya worshipped the Supreme Lord by offering fine garments, jewels. Note jewels is underlined and highlighted, and other valuable ornaments, wonderful scents, and ointments, and a large garland of lotus flowers. Now this is found in the writings of Rupa Goswami, the next. Rupa Goswami wrote many books, and one of the books he wrote is this one, Radha Krishna Gonadesh Deepika. And he describes everything about Krishna and Radha and their entourage and their paraphernalia and everything. So when he describes this gem, this is Rupa Goswami's writing, the Lord made his Kastuba gem enter the serpent's lake, and then he arranged for it to be presented to himself by the hands of Kaliya's wives. Lord Krishna wanted to act just like an ordinary human being. He made the transcendental Kastuba gem invisible and caused it to enter within Kaliya's treasury. When the appropriate moment came for Kaliya to worship the Lord with many different jewels and ornaments, the serpent's wives presented him with the Kastuba gem, thinking it was simply one of the jewels in their possession. Pretty amazing. On the authority of Rupa Goswami. Then the Supreme Lord ordered him to return back to the ocean so that the river can be enjoyed by the cows and humans. Krishna further told Kaliya that since his hoods were now marked with his footprints, Garuda will no longer try to harm him. So on his hoods were Krishna's footprints. So when Garuda he left because of fear of Garuda. But when Garuda sees my footprints on your hoods, no problem from Garuda. Receiving the Lord's permission, he circumambulated him and offered him obeisances. Then, taking his wives, friends, and children, he left for the island in the sea. The very moment, that's Fiji, the very moment Kaliya left, Yamuna was restored to her original condition, free from poison and full of nectarian water. Krishna rose up out of the lake, wearing divine garlands, fragrances, and garments covered with many fine jewels and decorated with gold. When the cowherds saw him, they all stood up immediately, just like unconscious persons' senses come back to life. There he is emerging out of the lake. Yashoda, Rohini, Nanda, everyone went up to Krishna. Filled with great joy, they affectionately embraced him. Even the dried up trees came back to life. See you later. And here's Krishna back in his palace in Nandagram. There's Krishna and Nanda Maharaj. And the artist identifies who all these personalities are amongst Krishna's cowherd boys. Of course, that's obvious. That's Balaram. But some of the boys had even looked a little bit like Krishna. And one of the boys, this one, looks a little bit like Radharani. There's many pastimes where Subal, one of Krishna's friends, would be sent on a mission to appear because his complexion and features are even like Radharani's. So he had some nice services to do. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, after the Leelas of Krishna were completed on earth, Kaliya attained Krishna Loka with Dasya Rasa. Very surprising. Very surprising. But he originally he was a sage, Vedashira. But he was envious, so his envy got relieved by Krishna's mercy. And he did some service, and he wanted to serve as Krishna's carrier, etc., etc. So he got that position. It's a little surprising. I find it a little surprising. But there are several places where it's mentioned, where there's lists of who's who in Krishna Loka. Kaliya's name is mentioned. Eternally residing with Krishna in the mood of service. Some photographs of the place in Vrindavan where the Kalia Lila took place. On the right side is a temple, and on the left side is what's inside the temple. It's a deity called Kaliya Mardan, and here's the place where the ghat was sticking out into the river, because the river used to flow right by here. And on the left side, you see the Kadamba tree. Of course, there's some devotee pilgrims visiting the place and hearing the katha that we just heard. Here's a deity of Krishna's dancing on Kaliya's hoods at Kaliya Ghat. And this very same, very, 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 very old Kadamba tree is said it's the very same tree from which Krishna jumped. But it was preserved by the nectar placed on it by Garuda. Some other photographs of the area. There are two places. One is in Warangal in Andhra Pradesh, and another is in Pune, where they have a deity of Kaliya in their on their grounds. Another is on the wall of one of the temples. It's a three-dimensional depiction of the wives offering their prayers. In museums, there's many, too many to show them all, but deities of Krishna dancing on the hoods of the Kaliya serpent. It's a very celebrated pastime. So it's been honored by sculptures and deities and so forth. Some very old drawings. In classical dance, it's a pastime that's commonly performed in different cultures in different parts of India. And in Fiji itself, this is our ISKCON Fiji deity. It's Kaliya Krishna. Now, last is something that's found in the teachings of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. That is, each of the demons that were dealt with by Krishna or Balaram, there's some significance in how Krishna was helping us, the sadhakas, to become freed from some difficulty that we may encounter on the path of devotion. And in this case, they write, Kaliya represents brutal cruelty, maliciousness, pride, envy, and snake-like crookedness. He particularly tries to pour his poison into the hearts of innocent Vaishnavas, which Krishna cannot tolerate. So the Lord kills him. Of course, he didn't kill him, he just relieved him. Here's the writing of Bhakti Siddhanta, word for word. Kali is the type of cunning and malice. He is the embodiment of unrelenting cruelty. There is no place for Kaliya in the happy realm of Braja. Deceit and cruelty are as poison to the artless, loving nature of the denizens of Braja. It is quite conceivable for the confidential friends of Krishna not to entertain any suspicion regarding the malicious intention of cruel and deceitful persons whose purpose is to poison them against Krishna. They may even unwittingly fall into the counsel of such evil persons, but Krishna is sure to rescue his own from the wives of his enemies. What Krishna is protecting by this pastime. So we can count on, is Krishna showing in his pastime. The sincere devotee will be protected by such wrongdoers. Yeah. So lots of paintings, and as a result of lots of paintings, it took lots of time to present all this. But the artwork is, I like artwork, and it gives a different, for sure, one of the things that it shows is it's a celebrated pastime that inspired artists in many places around the world and many time points in history to depict the pastime. And it's said that just hearing the pastimes of Krishna like this, there's enormous spiritual potency that are conveyed, potencies that are conveyed just within the narrations. So those speaking them, those hearing them, and the whole atmosphere becomes lifted. Consciousness becomes lifted just by hearing about Krishna this way. So somehow we had, the somehow is the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and the disciplic succession that he represented. He made this knowledge available over the world. I just was told 1 week ago, that there's effort to get the Chinese government to get an ISBN for cantos 10, 11, and 12. Some years ago, 8-10 years ago, they gave it the ISBN. That means you can legally print, the government can print cantos 1 through 9. For the Chinese government to give that okay, that's like, and they have a publisher that feels reasonably confident that his relationship with the people that give that stamp from the government, it's doable because it's classic literature. And the Chinese government makes a distinction between classic literature that's culturally from a country and something that's just like religious propaganda. They take the Bhagavatam as a traditional literature that's representative of a country's message and its historical culture. And the scholars know that. And what's in Prabhupada's writings and the BBT purports, it's not anti-government, it's just spiritual teachings. So anyway, who would have thought that Prabhupada would have been able to accomplish what he was able to accomplish? With the capable assistance of many, many persons, artists making the artwork and everybody doing everything to make the Bhaktivedanta purports available and then translated into so many languages so that people that don't know anything about Krishna can know about Krishna. It's a big mercy. I mentioned this the other day, yesterday, I think, somebody sent a little passage from the 12th canto Bhagavatam describing what happens at the end of the age of Kali. And one of the things in one little section, it says, people will be so harassed by governments that just for their safety and sanity, they leave for the mountains. And side by side with that was a posting saying what the Taliban is doing with the people in Afghanistan today. If they don't line up, they don't let them go to places where there's agriculture and valleys. They just won't even let them go. And they're harassing them so much, they're just leaving to go to live in the mountains. And it's only 5,000 years of the 432,000 years that Kali Yuga lasts. How is it going to become, what's it going to look like? It's only getting started. And of course, it's only one part of the world and so forth and so on. But it's really awful. It's really awful. And what to do? So the Vyasadeva answer is propagate the message of the Vedas. Make it available. Live it, speak it, and make it available to others in the form of these printed literatures. So distributing these literatures is very, very important. I'll say one final thing. Just this past Sunday, right? We observed Balaram's appearance day. It's the full moon in the month of Shravan. The next full moon is the month of Bhadra. The next month, right after when the full moon starts to wane, the very first day marks the next month, and then it becomes a new moon, and then it waxes and becomes a full moon. The next full moon is a day that's, according to the 12th canto of Bhagavatam, such an important day, such an auspicious day, that if the Srimad Bhagavatam is given to someone as a gift on that day, now it specifies on a golden throne, but a golden throne can be, what you want it to be. So all over the world where there's Bhagavatam translated, this Bhadra Purnima is being promoted. So if you know people that don't have a Bhagavatam set, you would like to gift them a Bhagavatam set, figure out a way to do it between now and this next Purnima. And according to what the Bhagavatam says, one who makes such a gift, you have a one-way ticket to Vaikuntha Loka. There's so much potency in this literature. I mean, the teachings are very involved. So many verses and so much understanding within them, but very profound. But coming in contact with it is very elevating and purifying. No, the 10th canto is meant to be heard subsequent to the earlier cantos, or say it. By hearing the earlier cantos, one is then more prepared to hear and understand these pastimes, because otherwise the pastimes sound like mythology or something, or imaginative something. Worldly people may very well see it like that. But it's the personality of Godhead performing wonderful pastimes. Just like we read or we heard for 3 evenings, Krishna's marrying Rukmini. That's his eternal consort. It's the goddess of fortune. And so he's eternally connected with her, but there's a pastime whereby he marries her. And there's some intrigue and some risk and some conflicts and things like that. It's just pastime. Supreme Lord is enjoying and is enjoying with his devotees. And he is purifying Kaliya. And he'll protect us from risks like that too, if we're sincere. So let's see if there's some discussion. Yeah.
All right, one question I have is in, in in practicing bhakti, the one problem that I face is being complacent or becoming complacent, familiarity with deities or familiarity with the arti process, or
You mentioned that last time I was here.
yeah, so no improvement in the last one. So my question is, uh, where should I focus to overcome this complacency? Because I might be standing in front of the deities, but after like 5 minutes, I realize, oh, I've been standing here, but I didn't take darshan of deities. So, uh, what am I doing wrong, or how should I approach this problem so I take this process more seriously in a very steady time frame?
I'll give a short answer that includes the longer one. This question you're asking was one that I decided to address at the last Festival of the Holy Name. The title of that topic is Indifference. That's an English translation of this. There's different Sanskrit words. It says the same thing as complacency. It has everything to do with our relationship with Krishna. So there's the deity and there's the function, there's the behavior of worshiping the deity, and then there's the relationship and eagerness to make that connection with that relationship. So when that becomes cold, using Bhaktivinoda Thakur's language, then that's a spiritual indifference. There may be, a material indifference towards this and that and the other thing that's of the material world. But when there's spiritual indifference, that's progress is very slow. And commonly, in due course of time, when that spiritual indifference is in place, then material attractions of different kinds will manifest in one's life, in one's mind, and in one's senses. So it's certainly something to be concerned about. And it has so the cure has everything to do with turning your attention again regularly when doing devotional practices, turning your attention again to the purpose behind them. So listen to that recording. Another nice place for you to look at is Bhaktivinoda Thakur's description. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's description of simply following rules without understanding or without being mindful of the purpose behind them. The other is neglecting the rules. That section. So there's a whole chapter on that topic in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Bhakti Loka. If you can't find a copy, let me know and I'll send you a digital copy. But but behind that, not being mindful of what the activity is meant for, it's indifference in our relationship with Krishna. So the starting point for bhakti, according to Bhagavad Gita, there's four types of. There's piety, and there's four motivations for pious people. But if it doesn't come to the stage of being focused upon your relationship with Krishna, if that doesn't replace those four initial impetuses, then it becomes mechanical, or complacency, or routine. So attention needs to go to the purpose behind the activity, or specifically restoring the relationship with Krishna that's now covered and forgotten. That's the essence of spiritual life. The essence of spiritual life is not the procedures or the rituals or the do's and the don'ts. The do's and the don'ts have a purpose, but the essence is not the rituals and the procedures and the do's and don'ts. The essence is restoring our connection with Krishna. That's bhakti. So you have to exercise your bhakti muscle a bit while doing whatever you're doing. And if you find, because in that other time you asked, it was specific about deity worship, find some other areas of your life, of your spiritual practices that you feel you connect better with, and do them. Do them, do them mindfully, and you'll find that Krishna connection, because of mindfulness, will have its effect on all the other activities that you do. The rising tide lifts all boats. So that Krishna connection spirit, whatever that activity is that you like, do a lot of that with the purpose, mindfully, that it's not for my happiness, it's for Krishna. And it's the relationship of service with Krishna. And that's our bhakti life. That's the internal cultivation of our bhakti life. And you do it nicely in one area, it'll have its impact on other areas. It starts with chanting. The best area to bring focus to, what's the purpose of my chanting while I'm chanting? Yes, back there's...
So, Guru Maharaj, here it looks like the wives of the Kaliya serpent were devotees all along.
They were elevated persons.
So, in some situations, we see that, the influence of the devotees and, there is transformation, but it looks like nothing happened to Kaliya, but he got direct mercy from Krishna. That's
What are you saying?
like the transformation for Kaliya, like, with the wives being so devoted, I'm saying, like, there was no
so they
change.
got benefit because of their wives.
Okay.
Like the wives of the Brahmanas, the Brahmanas became benefited because the wives.
Okay. So here
And
also
they eventually realized it, but initially, they didn't. They were proud. No, they didn't respond to the coward voice. But then when they realized, you're so fortunate. You got Krishna's mercy. We're fortunate to have such qualified wives as you. Now, not all husbands are going to say that, but the Brahmanas spoke like that about their wives, and Kaliya understood like that about himself. And Krishna doesn't need a cause to be merciful to Kaliya, but one could say he saw something in Kaliya that gave him impetus, not only just to get rid of him out of the lake, so the people of the Brijbasis could drink from the lake without being poisoned. But he saw something in him, and he relieved him, and he accepted him. And he surrendered. So, Krishna doesn't need a cause. But one could say that however the wives became like they were, he got the benefit of their wives being like they were. And they pleaded on his behalf. What did he do? Did he do this or that or the other to make him eligible to get what even the goddess of fortune is not able to get? He got. What great fortune. So they're marveling. But they're not ordinary people. Besides their bodies, their consciousness, their understanding of Krishna's position is extraordinary. So it's a lila, and he doesn't need a cause to deliver somebody. It can be causeless mercy, but he saw something.
Yeah, that's just very beautiful to see that even after all that envy, how Krishna relieved him. So that's just very, very, just so important and very remarkable to see that.
Yeah, well, Devotees can be like that too. There's one section in the 5th canto Bhagavatam in relation to Jad Bharat. He didn't say anything to anybody. Finally, he spoke to King Rahugana. And when he spoke to King Rahugana, it was volumes. And it was really high. Now, why didn't he speak to anybody? And instead, he spoke to King Rahugana, who was proud and insulting him and stuff. He could have just remained silent like he was with everybody else. What was it about Rahugana that made him make that, role switch? He saw something inside the king. And the king, after hearing from Jad Bharat, he became elevated. So what Jad Bharat saw, what Krishna saw, and what motivates a person that has no material attachments, we don't know, because we have material attachments. We think it's cause and effect kind of thing. They can show their causeless mercy. They don't need a reason. And when one could say, his wives appealed. And so Krishna reciprocating with the wives, who were obviously great devotees. He gave his mercy. But even before they started their prayers, look what he did. He relieved him of all that enviousness. So envious. There was flames coming from his mouths, and poison in the air. So he was a bad guy. Okay, there's something over here.
Sarji, as symbolically, can we take Kaliya as an ego in ourselves?
Well, it's not just ego, but specifically, there are other adjectives that go along with ego. Envy, malice, right?
So we can demolish the ego by praying to Krishna.
Well, yes, that's what we can do on our side. But, Krishna's got to show his mercy. It's not, it's not, it's what I'm saying here is, this is not a mechanical process. Bhakti is not a vending machine. So we do what we should do. And we're depending upon Krishna's mercy, recognizing our sincere efforts. But we're dependent upon his mercy. And he's not obliged. This came out in our discussion about Rukmini. She petitioned Krishna, but she also acknowledged, you're going to decide whatever you want to decide. And if you decide to not accept this request to marry me, then I'll just wait for as many lifetimes as it takes until you accept me, because I've given my heart to you. So we have to similarly allow Krishna is going to do what Krishna is going to do. Or the phrase that I like is, when you surrender unto Krishna, please bear in mind, it's on his terms. It's not that I surrender to Krishna and pray to Krishna and he's got to fulfill my, hurry up and fulfill my requisition slips. It's not like that. He's merciful, but how that mercy and when and what it's going to look like, that's up to him. And he's fully independent, and he knows better than we know how to, help us overcome ego and malice and envy and other, undesirable qualities. He knows. Someone else?
Maharaj, I have one question. And this might be unrelated to today's topic, but I was thinking about this. Most of what we feel in this material world is usually our own doing, our own
Yes.
karma.
Sadasad yoni janmasu. We create our own ill fortune, good fortune.
Correct. So what I was thinking was, why do we say, Krishna is the sarva karana karanam? Everything rests in him, but whatever occurs here, is it a I'm not able to understand where our
Will,
start and stop exists versus how do we perceive Krishna and the causeless mercy as well.
say the question again. Just the last part, because I
Like
want to
if
respond to
Krishna
your
says
question.
in the Gita that I don't interfere in material aspects, right? He says, okay, your own actions bear reaction, and that's what drives us. But then we say Krishna is the cause of all causes, right?
But he causes by sanctioning. He doesn't
Okay.
cause by willing. He wills for us to be with him, but he sanctions for us to be off doing other stuff. He's the cause of all causes. He's not causing us to choose, to misuse our free will. He's not causing that. He's the cause of all causes in that he gives us free will because we're his part and parcel. He has unlimited, we have tiny. But so he's the cause of that, but he's not the cause of, that's something that I take responsibility for. So is Krishna in charge of my choices of free will? No. It's free, otherwise it wouldn't be free will. And if it was no free will, then there'd be no love. There is love, because that's voluntary. It's a free will choice. So to say that he's the cause of all causes doesn't take love away, or free will, and misuse of free will, and then the consequences for the misuse of free will. He oversees all of it, and he's inviting us. So I think it sounds like, I'm not sure this is what your question is, but it sounds like, where does free will fit into all this if Krishna is the cause of all causes?
Something like that.
Something like that, because then that's something he's not the cause of. I am. That's my territory. And it's not Krishna's territory. It's my territory, my free will choices. I'll take responsibility for my free will choices, and that's under Krishna's jurisdiction. Okay. I'm a citizen of the state, and there's laws, and I can abide by them or not abide by them. But the state isn't going to determine each person, every moment, abiding or not abiding. Krishna doesn't micromanage our free will. But he gives the boundaries of dharma and adharma, and then there's transcendence. And it's a voluntary choice, dharma, adharma, and transcendence. And he's the cause of all of that. And in all of that, there's a relationship of love or not. From his side, it's love. And from our side, it's love or not love. That's our free will. So circling back, the logic would say, well, then he's not then the cause of all causes. Because one of the causes is my free will. That he's not, it's free will. He's not making those, it's not a causal, my free will choices are not caused by Krishna saying, now make this free will choice or that one. So it's independent of Krishna. And so the answer is we have minute independence that's given by Krishna. And that minute independence is really minute. And we can't fulfill anything. So it's like chapter 18, there's 5 factors of action. And one of them is endeavor. That's something, following our free will choices, we make some endeavor. One of the 5 factors. But I can endeavor all I like. If Krishna doesn't sanction, it's not going to happen. He doesn't interfere with our free will, but he grants it. So then some people argue, well, why doesn't he take it away? Well, he doesn't take it away because then there wouldn't be love. And there is. And love is a free will choice. It's a voluntary event, and series of events. It's just the spiritual reality is there we have free will. He doesn't take it away because it's constitutional to us. He's our best friend, advising us and holding our hand and everything, encouraging us to make our free will choices wisely. Minute independence. And he's the cause of that cause also. Okay? Anyone else? Do we have something online? No?
I have a question.
You had a question at the very beginning, and you've been very patient. Compliments to you for your patience.
You know, in the scripture, different animals are compared to different qualities,
Yes,
like trees for tolerance,
yes.
or
Monkeys are
donkeys
mischievous.
for fools,
Donkeys are foolish.
but the snake is for enviousness.
Enviousness, yes.
What is that specific quality of a snake is compared to enviousness?
What is it? The snake's quality?
Yeah.
Prabhupada describes it this way: even without provocation, the snake may attack. Without provocation. Not for any other. Not because they're hungry and they want something or something. They just. A scorpion is another. Scorpions and snakes. Without provocation, they just attack.
And the other question is, Kaliya participated in the Vrindavan Lila of Lord Krishna, but he was a Dasya Ras. That means he went
Dasya.
to Vaikuntha planets, not the Golok Vrindavan.
No, he was in Goloka.
Okay.
There's Dasya in Goloka also.
Okay.
Okay, we're done. Looks like we're done. Srila Prabhupada ki. Jai.